Y'all ready? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to, go back into regular session.
I'll make the motion when you go back into the regular session.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're back in session.
Thank you for your patience as we work through executive session. We have lots to cover tonight. The next item on the agenda is an update both on the GFA loan and on the project more generally. Can everybody hear me? Is that barely?
If the fan went down one, that might help a little bit, it's a little bit loud. Just down by one, we don't want it turned off.
I agree.
The other way.
That is the one.
I say just leave it off.
It's fine, it's not making a noise.
You open those doors, and then that way that air in the lobby will come out. Thank you.
So let me start with the GFA loan. At this point, the authority has received the last of its loan draws under the GFA loan. The amount of that loan draw was a little bit over $4.9 million. That fills out the remainder of the $27,500,000 available under the GFA loan. That loan draw process involved multiple reviews by GFA itself. They came back and asked all sorts of questions, as they've done with every single loan draw that we've done over the life of the project. The authority answered all of those questions, and GFA approved and has now dispersed those funds. We've got those funds. Much of that money was needed in order to move the waste-to-energy project forward to completion. And I'll get to an update on waste-to-energy itself. On the GFA loan, the amortized loan amount per month that begins, according to GFA, on July 1st is a little bit over $114,000 a month. We are set up with GFA for them to draw directly from the authority's bank account for that. So those payments will all be made in full and on time. We're not at the mercy of the U.S. Postal Service to make those payments. They're gonna pull it right out of the bank account. Before that July 1 payment date, the authority has already made payments beginning in April, monthly payments. Before the full loan amount was amortized, we made prepayments of the loan at $110,000 per month because they hadn't made the last of the draw disbursements yet. And then the authority also paid the extra $250,000 that we had voted on last fall, that the board had voted on last fall. That was made, and GFA applied that as a down payment to principal itself, so it reduces the overall principal balance that interest runs on under the loan. So that's the GFA update. Now, in terms of the project itself, there are 3 phases to the project, the way that we conceive of all of this. The first phase is the smaller of the 2 leachate evaporators. Those 2, once the authority received its permit to operate the facility at its location over off Industrial, it was at that point that we could begin operation of the first 2 leachate evaporators. Those were commissioned and put into service 16 days after we received that permit. We evaporate leachate from the Cedar Grove landfill under a contract with the vendor who operates the landfill for the authority. We evaporate 283,333 gallons per month under that contract. It's a put or pay contract, so if Amwaste doesn't send us that much leachate, they still owe us the same dollar amount under the contract. They have sent us the contracted amount each month, and we have processed the contracted amount each month, and they've paid us each month. So all of that contract is operational and in compliance from both sides of the ledger. We've passed not only the 1 million gallon mark in terms of processing leachate, but as of tomorrow, which will be the end of June, we will have processed 1,133,332 gallons worth of leachate. Every gallon of leachate that is processed, 94% of that gallon becomes steam that gets evaporated. So when you think of a tanker truck or a train car load or a huge bathtub full of leachate, you're getting rid of 94% of the volume of that leachate goes into the evaporation process, and only the remaining 6%, which is brine, gets returned to the landfill under the process approved by the EPD. It is the contracts with AmWaste and eventually with others to process leachate that are one of the sources for repayment of the GFA loan. It's not the only source, but it is in fact one of the sources. Phase 2 are 2 larger sets of leachate evaporators. And if you've driven by the facility, those will evalually operate from the 213,000 gallon holding tanks that are in place just outside the facility. As you drive by, you'll see the big silver tanks within a containment wall there. Those phase 2 evaporators are all in place. They've been permitted. The construction certification has been received from the EPD. The estimate for when they would be put into service was roughly 4 months from receiving the permit. Permit was received back in February, and we're about ready to turn those on. We just need a little more piping constructed, which we've actually got on site. It was delivered this week. So that will be finished, and then we'll be ready to turn on those phase 2 evaporators. We're in the process of obtaining additional contracts to use the capacity there on the same basic methodology as the first phase. And then phase 3 is what everybody would think of as the waste to energy project. And the status on that is the equipment that will prepare the fuel for the waste to energy project from waste will be moved from its current location on the landfill site across the street into the Intercom building. That's what's been permitted with EPD, and once that is moved, then the additional equipment will be assembled with it. And I'll walk through that. But before that can be done, part of the concrete floor had to be taken up in the Intercom building to make ready for the pouring of additional footers to hold the very heavy equipment that works in the process of creating the material that goes into this process. So we're in the process of getting the site ready to pour that concrete and moving forward with expansion of other pieces of the building to make room for the remaining equipment. That concrete has to cure for 30 days because the footings for that very heavy equipment are very deep, and it takes longer for, sort of like building a dam, you have to allow extra time for the concrete to cure. So once that concrete cures and the equipment is moved over, it'll be reassembled in the Intercom building. And then at that point, the remaining parts of the waste to energy project, essentially the pieces of the process that are used once the fuel is created, then you get to the pyrolysis process that creates the actual energy in the waste to energy process. That will be attached to it at the end. All of that equipment has been obtained under the GFA loan. Every bit of it is on site. And has been on site for quite some time at this point. And once that is done, then we'll go through a commissioning process on all of that equipment to make sure that it's all running correctly. As you can imagine, it's a big construction job in order to get The equipment disassembled from the landfill site, moved over, reassembled, and then tested and essentially connected to all of the other pieces that are necessary in order to make the process work. But all those pieces are in place on site. They're all there. In terms of scheduling, the phase one process was completed on time. The estimate was that it would be ready to go within a month of having received the permit. And rather than a month, it was up and running within 16 days. The phase two leachate evaporation process, the estimate was that it would be completed within 4 months after receiving the permit, and we're within a couple of weeks of turning that on at this point. So that's running on time. The estimate for phase three was originally that it would be ready a year after we received the permit. What we're looking at this point, our goal is to have the waste to energy, the phase three part of the project, operational by March of 2025, plus or minus 90 days. So that's the update on the project at this point.
Okay, board, does anybody have any questions, anything? All right, so the next item on the agenda is going to be officer elections. We have to elect our chairman, our vice chairman, and our secretary treasurer. So at this time, let's start with the chairman's position, and I'll open the floor, for the board's pleasure.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, sir.
You ready for nomination?
Yes, sir.
I will nominate our chairman, Ms. Nancy Thrash.
Okay, so we have a nomination on the floor for me to continue as chairman. Do we have a second? Okay, so that nomination dies for a lack of second. Do we have any other nominations for chairman? All right, hearing none, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Richard, I make a motion that we table the elections until the next meeting. The officer elections until the next meeting.
I would prefer not to do that.
I would also prefer not to do that.
Okay,
Um,
I will open up the floor for discussion.
Thank you. This is difficult for me. The reason that I did not second Joe's nomination is because I think there's some stuff that we need to talk about. And I think it's things that people out there need to hear. I want you to know, if I make a nomination, what I'm thinking and why I'm doing it. That's just important to me, okay? I will tell you that Nancy and I have not always seen eye to eye. And I think that is a pretty big understatement that she would probably agree with. And when I got on this board, this authority, I would not say that I was hostile, but I was certainly not on board. There's an awful lot of people out there who would, I think, are kind of in the middle. They just don't know. And I was kind of in that frame. I went out before I was ever elected to public office. I went out and talked to Johnny back in the days whenever everything wasn't proprietary, and you could still do that. I'll be honest with you, what I thought was gonna be an hour meeting turned into about 7 hours, and I left more confused than I was when I went in. So anybody that's feeling that right now, I get you, I've been there, okay? I was actually told by an elected official in Milner 4 years ago that we were gonna get $5 million. The city of Milner was gonna get a check for $5 million. Now, that official's no longer here. But we're gonna get $5 million a year from the landfill. Hey, I thought that was great. I had no reason not to believe it. But once I went and talked to Johnny, he said, that's not gonna happen. You know, eventually, there will be some money coming out of this, but it's not yet. Once I got into this thing, I started seeing where it was not only viable, it was going to be quite, in my opinion, I think it's gonna be quite profitable and benefit the county. Like everybody else, I was really concerned about basically $30 million that's coming out of the taxpayers' pocket. That's all I've heard, okay? That's just not the facts, okay? That's the perception, but it's not the facts, all right? And I've seen things that I'm not at liberty to discuss, even though most of it is in freedom of information, that bear that out for me. And I'm usually a pretty skeptical individual. But let's fast forward. Nancy Thrash, no matter what you might think of Nancy Thrash, in any other way, the council or commission or anything else, Nancy Thrash has done an excellent job as chairman of this committee. She has gone out there, she has kind of, for lack of a better term, run roughshod over a lot of this stuff. She's taken time that I don't think anybody else would have taken to do it. And I have seen absolutely, and you don't have to believe this, I'm just telling you, I've seen absolutely zero evidence that she has done anything in regards to this that is unethical, immoral, or illegal. Everything that she has done, in my opinion, has been above board. And I base that on the fact that I'm watching close. And this is nothing that I have not told her previously, so this is not a blind side, all right? I realize she got invested in her election, and even though the percentage of voters was not huge, it was a pretty good percentage that voted for her opponent, okay? And I think that means the people spoke. But you gotta weigh, we have to weigh, and I have to weigh personally, what's best for the county, in my opinion, when it comes to the SWA, and what's best for the SWA. And right now, this minute tonight, I believe that is Nancy Thrash. Now, I also realize that she's got 6 more months on her term as commissioner. So there's probably a bridge that we're gonna need to cross here in a few months. But right now, if you look around, about the only person who could take this over would be me. I don't covet the job. I would do it, but I do not covet that job, okay? Especially because Tasha and I are still the newest people on this board. And this is a lot to absorb. So I would kind of be starting flat-footed. And I don't think that's fair to me. I don't think it's fair to the project. And I don't think it's fair to you. It's not even fair to the people who want the project not to succeed, which I don't understand at all, because if that happens, then the taxpayers could be on top, okay? In my opinion. So, based on that, and me getting to give y'all my explanation for what I'm doing, because I try and think things out, I will nominate Nancy Thrash to continue as chairman.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion?
After that,
I have something I wanna say.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that I appreciate everything that you've done for this board, Nancy. And I do appreciate the time that you've put in, and what I'm about to say is not anything towards what you've done with this project, but as a solid waste authority board member, I have to look at what I feel like is the survivability of this authority. And because of just all the contention lately, I feel like that I'm going to not vote in favor of that, because I am looking at it from a business standpoint. And while you have done a great job as he's outlined, I just don't think that moving forward as an authority and also having to work, you know, in this county, and I'm a tax-paying citizen, I want what's best for this authority, because I don't want it to come down on our backs. And I also don't want it to come down on the backs of my citizens double. And so as a business standpoint, I really feel like this is not a vote that I can stand for, but I do want you to know that this is just business. It's not anything, my personal judgment against your character or anything like that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
For the record, Tasha is her,
Go ahead.
for the record, Tasha is, obviously doing her own vote, and I'm on the council and city council in Miller, and I like the fact that we got a city manager that will stand up for what she believes in, and I appreciate that.
Okay, is there any more nominations on the floor? Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna, this time on the vote, I'm gonna ask, all in favor of having me, be chairman, be reappointed chairman, signify by raising your hand. All opposed? Okay, so the motion carries. Okay, now, the second thing on the agenda is the vice chairman's position. I will open up the floor for nominations for the vice chairman's position.
I make a motion that we appoint Skip as the vice chair.
I'll second that. Okay, any discussion? Okay, any further nominations for vice chair? Okay, all in favor of Skip Seda as vice chair, please signify by raising your hand. Okay, all opposed? Okay, so the motion carries. Now, the next position that we have is the secretary treasurer. And I will open up the floor for nominations for the secretary treasurer position. Would it be the pleasure of the board to table the secretary and treasurer position for further discussion?
It'd sure be mine, yes.
Okay, would you like to?
I'll make a motion that we
motion?
table that.
Okay, so we have a motion to table the secretary treasurer position. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your hand. Okay, any opposed? Alright, so the secretary treasurer position is tabled until next month. I mean, until the next board meeting. I'm used to being in the commissioners. Okay, the next item on the agenda will be public comments. We have had 4 people sign up for public comments. The first person is Jason Lovett. The comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker, and if you'll come to the desk over here and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jason Lovett. I reside at 1198 Brown Road in Griffin, Georgia. And I want to start by saying thank you to those in the audience that allowed me to take your spot speaking tonight. Madam Chairman, the rest of the board, November 22nd in this very room, I echoed the concerns of outgoing District 2 Commissioner regarding missed deadlines, mismanagement, in missing money. Nearly 2 years later in the same room, let's take stock of where this project is, locally. The landfill, the initial charge of the Solid Waste Authority, is under private control and takes in 4 times the trash every day as pre-project. The new company keeps the millions in profits, while we get to keep the long-term liabilities of their actions. The project is reviled by the public, as demonstrated on the web, in the paper, and in the voting booth. It also ended the political career of one commissioner and destroyed the credibility of another. Statewide, the project and the county are on the hook for the largest loan ever made by GFA. The project also handed the largest percentage defeat to an incumbent in state history. And it made Fox News twice. Nationally, it garnered the attention of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. As for producing fuel derived from waste, not a drop. Saying this project appears to be a failure is an understatement. But it's not the first time. This is the second multi-million-dollar waste of fuel failure in Lamar County involving the Solid Waste Authority. I believe the $4 million worth of pyrolysis units to be repackaged biosphere remnants from 2008's failed project. And despite countless hours searching the United States Patent and Trademark Office, I found no evidence to contract that belief. So where do we go from here? There are 2 clear paths forward. Path 1, the olive branch. In coordination, excuse me, sir?
You're out of time.
Out of time? So you don't want to hear it? Madam Chair, would you like me to continue since I have the time of other members of this community?
You're out of time, we have 2 minutes, so thank you for your comments. The next person on the agenda is Bonnie Martin.
I'd like to give my time to.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Bonnie.
It doesn't work.
No, sir.
Yes, she
She can
does.
yell.
She
Yes,
can
she
yell
can.
her time.
Yes, she can.
Ms. Bonnie, if you'll come up here. I dropped off from where do we go from here?
Learn the rules.
So where do we go from here? Right there. Read it on down.
Ms. Martin, do you mind giving your name and address for the record? Thank you.
Bonnie Martin, 626 Piedmont Road, Barnesville.
Thank you.
There are 2 clear paths forward. Path 1, the olive branch. In coordination with the county commissioners, the SWA, by vote or verbal commitment tonight, initiates an engineering audit of all SWA operations to be completed by September 27th, 2024. With tonight's acknowledgement, the county commission can begin drafting RFPs that are open and transparent and inclusive at its July workshop and meeting. Should participating auditors find merit in the SWA's work and agree to commit the final financial resources to finish the project and relieve the county of its debt obligations, I'll endorse the project's continuation and autonomy in a front-page newspaper apology. Should the auditors fail to find reasons to continue the work, the SWA agrees to cooperate in a complete and orderly wind down of the project and assist in the revision of all associated contracts. Path 2, the nuclear option. Commissioners use the legislative functions enshrined in the state constitution and Lamar's enabling legislation, referred to as home rule, to redress grievances. Lesson 1 in commission training was learn to count to 3. I believe this issue has the immediate voting strength required and needs not wait until January the 2nd. Through action or inaction.
Ms. Martin, your time's up. Thank you.
Hold the place.
Thank you, Ms.
That's
Martin.
2 minutes I've ever heard.
Thank you.
Where's the place, Bonnie?
Hold the place of the paper.
Why is he going to the meeting?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're all good.
So we'll get something down there for that too, and I probably
Cindy
should know it.
Busby? Bushby, I'm sorry, I apologize. Ms. Bushby,
Last two sentences.
Cindy Bushby, 155 Redbone Run, Barnesville, Georgia. Through action or inaction, should the Solid Waste Authority ignore the olive branch and choose path 2, the nuclear option, be forewarned? The legislative process has no mechanism for project review. Your representatives acting on the behalf of the people will simply press the big red button and this project goes boom. We have never been given the information to why since 2017 the Solid Waste Authority has not made a net income of $2.5 million or more a year to pay into the Lamar County tax budget. This is the amount that was promised to the commissioners in 2014 when they co-signed the GFA loan. Please explain how and when the shortfall of funds will be paid. It is now around $17 million and counting as each month goes by.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Dixie Benson. Mr. Lovett, I'm gonna ask you to sit down and not interrupt our meeting again. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Would you state your name and address?
Dixie Benson, 399 Grove Street.
Yep.
When I came to the September meeting that was around this, and Johnny Poor gave his spill, his goal said that it was to reduce what was in the landfill. From my front porch, that mountain continues to grow taller and it continues to grow wider. I, as a tax-paying citizen, am not very happy with what I'm seeing. We're getting liquid that's going down to the bottom of it. We're processing that. But I could have sworn that Johnny Poor said that we were going to reduce the amount of mass that was in the landfill, and we won't be taking up as much space. Instead, they're making plans to expand the landfill and have another, for lack of a better term, another bay where we're gonna put even more trash. That concerns me. I am right down the street from that, and it's growing in my front yard. When are we going to actually reduce what's in the landfill? That is my question, and that would be the pyrolysis system, not the leachate. The pyrolysis was supposed to be the focus, from what I could understand when we went to that September meeting. Instead, we've got leachate up and going, and so much has been processed, but how much of that came from our landfill, and how much of that has come from other landfills, where again, it was brought in. Thank you for bringing it to our area. We don't need any more.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, that concludes the public comment section. At this time, does anybody on the board have any further comments, statements? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
A second.
All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Having a dog, his pony
I need to have his name on the shirt.